I wanted to ask you if you have seen this movie, Get Shorty. It's the 90s movie, a great Hollywood movie with Danny DeVito, Dennis Farina, and John Travolta. And there is a great scene when John Travolta wants to leave a restaurant, goes to a cloakroom, and his coat is gone. The owner of the restaurant says, "We're sorry, Mr. Barboni borrowed it." And Travolta goes, "What do you mean borrowed it? It's cold outside, so he took it." And surprisingly, this scene is a very accurate analogy of what we are facing now in Poland.
Hello, I'm John O'Brien. I'm Head of Communications with MCC Brussels. Welcome to another edition of Deep Dives, the series where we take a more in-depth look at reports produced by MCC Brussels. Today, I have a fun one for you. If you're interested in undermining democracy, you need to check out Donald Tusk's Anti-Democracy Handbook. It's written by a Polish journalist, Artur Ciechanowicz. How to capture a state, dismantle the rule of law, and not get persecuted by the European Commission. Arthur, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Your report opens with Mario Vargas Llosa's quote about Mexico's perfect dictatorship, drawing a parallel to Tusk's government in Poland, suggesting that it maintains a democratic facade while consolidating power, undermining institutions, and suppressing opposition. Arthur, you're a Pole, you've lived in Brussels for a long time. Has this been your experience of the new Poland?
In a sense, because as we know, Mexico was governed by the Revolutionary Institutional Party for about 90 years, and there was a constitution, there were elections, they were winning the elections, but everyone in Latin America and in the US knew that it is not a democracy, that it is a corrupt state. But at the same time, it was not a totalitarian state as we know it in Europe. So every analogy is not 100% accurate, but this one is very close. Because as you just said, we're on the path towards a state where the facade is maintained, the democratic facade is maintained, but the gist, the core, is not democratic anymore. That's where we're heading.
Was it a shock for you to experience this?
Not really. If you look at the past 30 years, or over 30 years after 1989, after the fall of the communism, the so-called fall of the communism, it's better to say that the communism prolonged its life into the Third Republic through the deep state, the comprador elites. And these 30 years were marked by a battle between the nation, the people, and the corrupt elites. And now we've just got another scene of this battle, and hopefully in the end the people prevail. But it's not a shock, it's not a surprise. We've seen it before in different entourage.
Mm-hmm. You describe Poland as a testing ground for tactics like judicial purges and media control. How do you respond to critics who argue that these measures are necessary for combating corruption or restoring order rather than threatening democracy?
Well, first of all, the term authoritarian regime has a very clear definition. Authoritarian regime is a system where opposition cannot operate, act freely. In Poland, it was never the case under the rule of Law and Justice, PiS party. And I think that's the strongest argument. You can say whatever you want, or many things about peace, about Jarosław Kaczyński, but not that he's a dictator or that he tried to introduce some kind of authoritarian rule. It's just propaganda, which resonated well in Brussels, but it's not true. It's simple as that.
And now with Tusk, do you see Tusk and those way of operating being like Back to the Future? It's more reminiscent of communist times.
In a sense, I would compare it more to post-communist post-communist times. As I said, the deep state, the post-communist oligarchs, this shady network of people who do business together, the politics, the business, the media, no clear boundaries between the media, the politics, and the business. I don't want to hijack this interview, but I wanted to ask you if you have seen this movie, Get Shorty. It's the 90s movie, a great Hollywood movie with Danny DeVito, Dennis Farina, and John Travolta.
Yeah.
And there is a great scene when John Travolta wants to leave a restaurant, goes to a cloakroom to recover his coat, and his coat is gone. And the owner of the restaurant says, "We're sorry." I guess he was Ray in that film. He was a Shylock. He was lending money, and the owner of the restaurant says, "We're sorry, Ray. Mr. Barboni borrowed it." And Travolta goes, "What do you mean borrowed it? It's cold outside, so he took it." And surprisingly, this scene, a great movie, this scene is a very accurate analogy of what we are facing now in Poland, because the rule of law is a great concept if it works. But if the government ceases to implement law, then we've got something like this. You go to a government office, you want to get, let's say, a building permit. You fill all the papers, and it should go automatically. Just like you go into the cloakroom, you show the tag, and you recover the coat. But if the government or the officials or the people in power, regardless of whether it is a democracy or it is a monarchy, maybe it's a Caesar or a king, a prime minister or whatever, if they quit to apply the law, then you've got a situation like this. An owner of the restaurant says, "We ain't got your coat, and what you gonna do about it?"
Yeah. Now, you highlight the use of the justice system for political retribution, show trials, mistreatment of political opponents. How does this shift from neutral judiciary to a political tool that impacts ordinary Polish citizens?
It is dangerous, and this very area reminds me of the communist rule, because in the communist times, the secret police, the judiciary, their role was to protect the inner occupation. The role was to protect the system, not to implement the law, not to apply the law, but to protect the system so that it stays intact. And now that's what we are facing to a certain extent. I mean, Poland is not a communist state. It's not this scale of lawlessness or of legal nihilism. Not yet. But
It's heading in that direction.
exactly. And that is what's very very worrying. If you see, you can clearly see that the law, very strict law, is applied in certain situations, and in others it's not. There is a celebrity social campaigner in Poland very close to the governing coalition. I've heard in the past 3 or 2 weeks, I've heard of 2 arrests of people who have written something on social media. It was interpreted as a threat to kill the social campaigner, but it was a stretch, in my opinion. First person, it was an elderly lady of 66, so it's rather improbable that
She's going to be a hit person.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other person, it was a handicapped young man with autism who has difficulties in communicating with the surrounding.
Were these arrests meant to send a chilling effect?
Exactly. It was they want to intimidate people this way. But on the other hand, a couple of days ago, a Ukrainian activist living in Poland threatened actually that there will be riots, social unrest, if the Polish state doesn't recognize let's say it's not the quotation, but privileges of the Ukrainians. I haven't heard of police visiting her. So we can see that the law is applied in a very arbitrary manner, and it's called arbitrocracy when the law is not something exterior that is applied more or less automatically. Of course, there are no ideal systems where law just works, but that's the other side that's the opposite situation when the law is applied at will.
Arthur, you were on the beat reporting in the Brussels bubble for many years. You also worked in Germany. You're familiar with journalism in this part of the world. Could you explain to me why and how that Politico, the political playbook, for example, not a day goes by, feels like sometimes not an hour goes by, without some criticism of Hungary and the rule of law in Hungary? How come we've heard nothing about rule of law violation in Tusk's Poland?
That's a very good question, John. I wish I knew the answer to this question, but joking aside, there's also a huge, the European journalism is in a huge crisis. A good friend of mine, a German journalist, Boris Reitschuster, he used to be a correspondent for numerous German magazines in Moscow for many years. And you cannot call him a Putin supporter or whatsoever. He wrote a book, Putin's Demokratur. But at the same time, his diagnosis of the German and broader European journalism is very severe. It's my personal opinion that we hardly get to experience a real journalism anymore. It has become more of a public relations, public affairs thing.
It's just shocking that there's no examination of Tusk's Poland, and that's a real shame. With Tusk's government openly defying judicial norms and refusing to recognize constitutional tribunal rulings, what does that mean for Poland's democracy? Could this set a dangerous precedent for other European countries?
Together with the European Commission's silence, absolutely. Well, as you said, we can see the double standards. Hungary is being attacked on a daily basis, God knows for what, while Poland, where the real coup d'etat is underway, a crawling coup d'etat. A couple of days ago, the chairman of the Constitutional Tribunal informed the General Prosecutor's Office that, in his opinion, well, it's not an opinion,
His judgment.
his judgment that we're facing a coup d'etat, and the prosecutor's office opened an investigation into this matter. So it's not a matter of speaking. It's an assessment of a judge, one of the most important judges in Poland. But answering your question, in the Polish legal system, the Constitutional Tribunal checks whether the new laws conform with the Constitution. So it's one of the most crucial institutions in Poland, because it checks the legislative branch it keeps the legislative branch in check. The Parliament cannot pass any law they wish, because there is a system of check and balances. If you don't have it, then again, that's the temptation of legal nihilism might become too big.
The European Commission once harshly criticized PIS for allegedly undermining the rule of law, but now again turns a blind eye to Tusk's actions. Is Brussels complicit in the erosion of Polish democracy? What does this silence mean for the EU's credibility, in your view?
For a couple of years, or for several years, the European Commission positioned itself as an actor on the Polish political scene, which is against all the treaties. It did so by commenting on the internal affairs, internal situation, but not only. The conditionality mechanism, which was adopted during or after the COVID pandemic to oversee the distribution of recovery funds, gave a powerful tool to the European Commission to interfere in the internal affairs. And withholding funds from Hungary and from Poland was a political act. I'm not sure if it was illegal, but it was definitely unlawful, because Poland fulfilled all the conditions to receive the payments, and yet it was clear that it is a political game. And the European Commission wants the opposition, the then opposition, to use this topic in the electoral campaign. And it happened.
So I understand the European Commission don't like PIS and think that they are not playing, they're playing hard and fast with the rule of law. Okay. But then Tusk comes in and he's doing the exact same thing, from what you're saying, even on a grander scale. And they turn a blind eye because he's their guy. Is that the way it works? That if you're on our team, you can do what you like. If you're on the other team, we're going to use the rule of law as lawfare against you.
That's part of the truth. Of course, there is probably this factor as well, but perhaps we should rewind a little bit and look what PIS did from 2015. This party fought the gravest pathologies of the Third Polish Republic, structural poverty. It introduced the 500 plus payments for children. Didn't exist before. It closed a tax loophole. PIS recovered about 15 billion of euros. And it just started to play accordingly to Poland's potential. And obviously, Brussels didn't like it. So that's the second reason why Poland was under such a savage attack from Brussels and Berlin as well.
But what did PIS, though, do? Was it the culture war issues? Was it the fact that they are a conservative Catholic type of party? Is that what they didn't find favor with ultimately, do you think? Or was it that it wasn't Donald Tusk and they wanted Donald Tusk in? What was the reason they came down so hard on PIS?
In my opinion, the main reason was the economy. I interviewed once a German businessman who was doing business in Poland. He was also helping the German enterprises to enter the Polish market. And he was surprisingly honest and frank. And he said, look, we have built the Third Republic, we, the Germans, as our backyard, as a source of cheap labor. And if you've got PIS coming and introducing the social transfers, closing the legal and tax loopholes, it probably hits someone's interests. That's one thing. But absolutely, the cultural, the religion, the Catholicism
Didn't play well either.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Your report suggests that Poland's government selectively recognizes judicial bodies based on political convenience. What does this mean for the judiciary's independence and the broader principles of justice?
It means that there is no judicial independence and that there is no security, there is no sense of security and predictability. Because if the people in power can decide which rulings they respect or which institution they respect and which they do not, then a simple citizen, what are probably his thoughts about it?
There is no law and order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because, I mean, for a rule of law to work, you need to apply these rules. Actually, the rule of law is a great concept. I mean, it was probably invented by a lazy genius who thought, why should I every time I'm confronted with a certain situation, why should I take a decision? It's better to build something abstract and apply it to this situation, to that. But there's also this second concept, which works very well with the rule of law concept, the concept of equality before law. And it's purely Western Christian concept, stemming from the assumption that although we differ in flesh, we all have an immortal soul, and we are equal before God. So we should be equal
For the law. Yeah.
Exactly. And if the law is not applied equally, or if the institutions tasked with interpreting or with applying the law are ignored, or the others, or sometimes ignored, or some rulings are ignored and others not, it's not the equality. That's yeah.
The public broadcaster takeover turned it into a government propaganda tool. Basically, the public broadcaster was taken over. How does this media manipulation affect public opinion in Poland and Poland's democratic reputation in the EU, do you think?
Luckily, and perhaps a little bit surprisingly, the Poles are very resilient to this dull propaganda. The quotas of the public media after takeover have fallen dramatically, and luckily, two opposition or let's say opposition to independent TV stations were founded in between, and their quotas skyrocketed. So it's not that pessimistic, but they're facing threats that their broadcasting permit or permits will be withdrawn. And here you have the arbitrary or a danger of the law being used arbitrarily again in an arbitrary manner.
How do you see the path forward for Polish people? What can be done? Like the European Commission backing Tusk's undemocratic actions, the media turning a blind eye, I think it is more than anything else. They just turn the other way and we don't hear. This is one of the few reports that I've actually seen detail some of the things that are actually happening. So how do you see the path forward? How can Poland be rescued by the Polish people?
That's a very, very difficult question. But I think that the economy might rescue Poland, because it's the data from yesterday or from today. The investments are falling dramatically. The investment rate this year is planned to be 16% of the GDP in Poland, while an average in Europe is 21% GDP. So Poland is significantly below this average mark, and it means that the investors are withdrawing from Poland because they cannot. Because when you misapply the laws, the investments are not safe, and they're voting with their money, and that might be one of the nails to the Tusk's political coffin.
Artur Ciechanowicz, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for watching. And you can check out Arthur's report in the notes section of this podcast, and have a read and tell us what you think. We think it's important that people turn their eyes towards Poland and see what's going on with Tusk. Thank you very much. Join us again on another episode of Deep Dives. This is John O'Brien signing off for MCC Brussels.